Welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're reading Reddit stories from people who knew a murderer before they knew. Classmates, neighbors, conversations that felt normal at the time until everything changed. If you enjoy true and unsettling Reddit stories like this, make sure to subscribe. And with that said, let's get into it. Serious people who personally met serial killers before they were caught. What were they like? And did they do anything that should have been a red flag? I've known some scary people in my life. It's part of being poor and having a father who was in the gray area of the law for a while. When I was in the 5th grade, my best friend was raped and killed by a serial killer. We didn't know it was him for about a decade. After he killed her, he stuffed her under his bed, showered, and came to our trailer to ask if we had seen her. A missing persons report was filed and the cops were called. I waked with him, my dad, and a sheriff's deputy for 3 days, showing them where we would walk and play while dogs and people looked for her body and ponds were dredged for it. She was 6 to 8 years old. It's been a while, and I don't remember her exact age. Later on in life, my dad got an education and started a law firm. One of his clients was a guy named Nick. Nick was an okay guy, not what you would call upstanding, but we were not people to judge others, and he treated us well. Lots of minor stuff, yelling with the ex, custody arguments, nothing violent. Maybe a do-I, not trying to minimize, was a very rural area, and while inexcusable it happened, or public intoxication. Nothing that had him fingerprinted or booked. One day our small town notices an increase in federal activity, obvious because the FBI sticks out anywhere outside of the DC area in our small town with an average income of $17,000 in 1994. Don't remember the exact year. 1 or 2 may not have elicited a response, but 40 sure did. So in about an hour, the whole town knew they were there, and we all looked to see what was going on. Well, turns out they were there for Nick. They had set up a checkpoint for him at the end of his dirt road. Someone drove to the house next door, hopped over the back fence, and told Nick. He shimmied under the fence in the back, told the neighbor what was up, and the neighbor helped Nick out. The neighbor owned a propane delivery company and had modified some of his trucks with hidden compartments that he used to move meth and weed in large quantities. The compartments were large enough that Nick was able to climb in, and the neighbor drove him on out, right past the FBI. Turns out Nick was Fane 3 in the Aryan Brotherhood and was responsible for their meth trade. When he left the area, the meth manufacturing business dropped off quite a bit, and the area stopped being the top production area of the state. The third guy was a kid I went to HS with. He was a bit of an outcast and had a rough home life. His foster parents were abusive. He wasn't clean and was one of those kids who lacked natural social skills and they give a shit to fake it. He smoked weed and hung out with the potheads. I was friends with a couple of them and started to get to know him. I felt bad for him because he didn't have any friends and I knew what it was like to be a reject. A couple weeks after we started talking, he wasn't at school. Turns out he killed a family with an axe and was arrested. He had made threats against parents and teachers, and nobody thought to do anything about it until it was too late. Finally was a guy I became friends with. He was part of my girlfriend's social circle and a nice guy. We got along really well and would hang out, go watch movies, drive around, and be idiots. Typical teenage shit. The weird thing about him was he would get a page and vanish. I asked him, "Dude, are you selling?" He said, "No, man, I had a meth habit, but almost died, so I don't do that." Well, what's up with the pager? He shrugged it off, and I found out later, and it was confirmed that he worked for the MM in disposal. Because of the lack of law enforcement and the nearly infinite amount of available land, the Mexican mafia had decided the area we were in was a good place to bury bodies they didn't want found. He did the burying. Not long after I moved away from that town and changed the people I associated with. Not aware of any other crazies I've met since my younger days. Have you ever met a killer? Have you ever met a killer? Or think you've met one? I made a throwaway account to post this because it still creeps me out 12 years later, and I don't want it linked to my account that could identify me. About 12 years ago, I was in my early 20s and living in a southern state in the US. Late one night, I realized I urgently needed to buy something, and so I went to the only store near me I knew was open, a Walmart Supercenter that was owed 24.7. This store is right off a major U.S. interstate exit, I-85, and it was a weekday around 1 a.m. in the morning when I was at the store. The parking lot of this store is huge, and often truckers, big rigs, would park their trucks in the lot overnight, along with some random campers and RVs. I was in line to check out and immediately noticed the man in front of me. The store was otherwise almost empty. He was youngish white guy, average build, maybe 30s. He was hunched over, with a baseball cap bunched down over much of his face. He purchased these items: a shovel, 3-pack of duct tape, rope, a set of zip ties, a box of latex gloves, a pair of leather gloves, an empty gas container, the red plastic kind, and a disposable cell phone, one of those track phone type things. He seemed to be unwilling to engage with the checkout person, who also seemed annoyed to be working at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday. Fair enough. He paid in cash. Now, even if he wasn't buying those items, I think I would have felt creeped out. There was something just off about the situation to me. I know that sounds crazy, but I just sensed something wrong. But to buy those specific items together and nothing else, to buy them at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday and to pay cash, I waited in the store for a long time and asked the assistant night manager to walk me to my car, which he didn't want to do, but finally agreed. The next day, I called the local FBI field office and reported the situation. The people taking the complaint asked me repeatedly if I was calling in response to a specific crime, creepiness, but took my information, didn't hear of anything or see anything on the news that caused alarm. TAKM. A few months later, the FBI local office reached back out to me to ask if I paid with a credit card at Walmart. I did. I never heard from them again. I have no idea who the man was, what he was doing, who he may have harmed, or where he did it. I don't know if he's been captured or not, but I'm pretty darn sure I witnessed someone buying things to murder someone else. Anyone else ever have a run in with someone they suspected of killing someone else? Has anyone here ever met someone who ended up being a murderer? You know, it's crazy because most people go their whole lives without ever encountering a murderer. I, on the other hand, have encountered 3. One of my best friends ended up beating his great-grandma to death with a hammer. Looking back, I suppose there were signs that he wasn't right, but violent, a murderer. No, none whatsoever, at least not that I could see. The whole thing definitely came as a shock. A guy I had a brief fling with as a teenager stabbed his mom 17 times. No signs whatsoever. He got high and snapped one night randomly. He turned himself in the same night. Also, in my teens, the mother of a boy I used to party with snapped and shot her husband, who was a well-respected cop in our community. She was actually featured on an episode of Snapped. Her name is Tonya Ford, but I can't remember which episode she was on. Another one of my good friends has spent most of his life in prison over 3 separate attempted murder charges. The first time, he shot a guy in the face and nearly killed him. The second, he slit a guy's throat and nearly killed him. The third time, he took a fork and stabbed his girlfriend in the face and neck over 19 times. I have no clue how none of his victims died. Pretty crazy, though. I also have no clue how he's out of prison, but he is. He's actually doing really well. He got sober, got his life together, and has stayed out of trouble for the last few years, as far as I know. I honestly cannot believe I forgot this. It happened about 10 years ago when my ex-husband and I were still married. His sister was shot and killed by her ex-boyfriend, whom he and I both met and briefly lived with. We had fallen on hard times and stayed with his sister for a couple of months. During that time, we met her boyfriend probably 4 or 5 times. He seemed normal, I guess you could say, but he was very, very obsessed with her. She definitely did not deserve to die, and I loved her very much, but she played a lot of games with his head. We kept telling her to stay the hell away from him because he had already put his hands on her before. She swore up and down that he would never truly hurt her. Sadly, she was very, very wrong. About 2 weeks after my ex-husband and I moved out, his other sister came to our house, crying, to tell us that Tara had been shot and killed at the end of her driveway. Apparently, her ex had been sleeping underneath her trailer. After she was killed, the police found a sleeping bag, snacks, wrappers, empty pop cans, bottles, and even piles of human feces. No one knows how long he had been sleeping under there and listening to her conversations through the floor. For all we know, he could have been there while my ex and I were still living there. One night, he left his spot from underneath the trailer and broke into her house through a window. He woke her up at gunpoint. She and her cousin ran to the end of the driveway, but he shot her 3 times, twice in the back and once in the back of the head. Then he stole a neighbor's truck and drove off. They caught him a few hours later. He is still in prison. It was horrible. So yeah, I guess that means I know 4 murderers instead of 3. Have you ever met someone who gave off serial killer vibes? If so, what did they do? There was an older guy, Lenny, that lived across the alleyway from us growing up. I'd say in his 40s, early 50s. Something about this guy felt off to me. Whenever I saw him in his backyard, I'd just run in the other direction. I had this friend, I'll call her Jamie, and she was kind of that friend that always found a way to do something we absolutely shouldn't and was just a little dark, but I liked her. I do think she had a troubled home life in retrospect, though I didn't understand that then. For context, she would elaborately tie her Barbies up in like rope and shit and show them to me when I'd go over her house. I obviously knew this wasn't exactly normal. I never told anyone about it. She somehow befriended this neighbor guy and pressured a few of us to go sit in his yard with him one evening to play. I was well under 10 at the time. She was my age. He was directing us to play games, at first innocently, like tag and guessing games, guess where he hid something at Sierra. And after a while, he suggested that she unbutton a button on her shirt because she had lost. Alarm bells went off in my head, but none of the other girls seemed bothered and even laughed like it was hilarious. Then he said he had hid something inside of his house we had to find. I immediately said I had to go home, and thankfully all the other kids agreed, and we left. I have no idea why I didn't tell my parents this, but I didn't. I think in my own kid way, I was scared of getting Jamie in trouble. A few weeks later, my youngest sister went missing. It was the summer, and we played outside in the morning and would come home to eat lunch. She was maybe 6 or 7. She shouldn't have been far, but my mom couldn't find her in any of our usual spots. I also hadn't seen her outside playing and told her so. This may sound crazy now, but this was the early 90s. Times were different, and we always stayed a yard or 3 away at most. All of our friends lived on this same street. My mom panicked and immediately raised hell, called police, everything. They told her to relax and wait a while to see if my sister showed up. That's when I finally remembered and told my mom about Lenny. Thank God I did too, and that I even remembered him in that moment and somehow put 2 and 2 together. They immediately went to his house. Sure enough, he was outside putting things into his truck. My sister and my friend Jamie were inside. They told him he was getting his truck ready because they were all going on a trip, which he flat out denied and said only HE was going on a trip. They were simply confused and hanging out as he packed his truck, and he told them Jamie came by often and he was just trying to be nice to her because she seemed troubled. I knew better because of what he'd said to her during those games, and thankfully, my mom 100% believed me. Nothing was ever done about it though, and Jamie denied anything sus ever happening. The police talked to him for a long time and left, and my mother and other parents made sure to always keep a super close eye on us outside until he eventually moved not long after. I'm 100% convinced to this day, if things had played out a little differently, I would have never seen my sister again. People who knew murderers, when did you know something was off? Oh man, I am way late on this, but I could have answered this question very well. It was my brother. He died when I was 13. He was 18 at the time. I knew he was capable from the time I was 6 and he was 11. He used to play death games. He would sit on my chest, use his knees to hold down my arms, suffocate me until I passed out, and then wake me up and do it again. There were days where he did this for an hour or more. That's on top of the other kinds of abuse any you can think of it happened. I was regularly raped, beaten, and suffocated for a year. One time, he made stand in front of him while he punched me in the balls repeatedly. He wanted to make me a man, and he wouldn't stop until I didn't flinch from the pain. I couldn't tell any of this because I was more afraid of him than confident my parents could or would do anything. He was my primary babysitter. After that year, he moved out. My mom worked nights and my stepdad was a truck driver. One night, my brother decided that he would feed me garbage. He cracked an egg onto a plate, put coffee grounds and other crap from the garbage can onto it. When I refused to eat it, he put salt and pepper and said it was now more appetizing. The resulting mess was still there when my mom came home, and she wasn't happy. She told us both that if we couldn't keep the house clean, we weren't allowed to eat her food. He balked at this and moved in with other family. I was finally free for a short time, though I didn't eat anything but school lunch for 2 days until my uncle found out and put a stop to it. Anyway, from 12 to 18, my brother got in a lot of trouble. He was arrested multiple times for assault. He was in and out of alternative programs like Outward Bound and boot camp. Finally, at 17, he was sentenced to 2 years in juvenile detention. He spent a year in and came out to live with a preacher in another nearby town. Eventually, they convinced the parole board he was rehabilitated, and over the objections of our local police, let him off all probation and parole. That preacher introduced him to friends of his who my brother eventually moved in with. He also met a girl. They met right before summer started, and he was in love. To her, it was a summer fling. When she broke up with him, partly due to his controlling, abusive behavior, he lost it. He came back home one weekend to meet up with some friends. He also came to see us. Later, my mom would say she knew something was up with him, but that is all hindsight. Sunday night, he went back home. Monday night, he killed his 3 roommates execution style with a gun he got from a friend that had perpetrated a burglary of our local hardware store. He also stole one of the victims' cars. He then drove 8 hours to where his ex was in college. He arrived pretty early Tuesday morning and somehow got into her dorm room. Tuesday morning, he found his ex and shot her in the foot, threatened to kill her, and then locked him, her, and a few of her dorm mates in a room. A 6-hour hostage standoff with police ensued. Eventually, he stuck his head out the window one too many times and a police sniper shot him right in the neck. He tried shooting at the cops as they stormed in, but he was dying. He died later in the hospital, and my family became national news for a short time. When did I know? I knew that the moment I was 6 and the bad times began. I thought I'd be his first victim. The day he died was the first day of my real life. A day without terror. I might have met a serial killer. I was a teen runaway heading back home to Washington from Montana on February 25th, 1997. I had 2 male companions, also teen runaways with me, and we had stopped at Quartz Flats campground rest stop in Montana for a break from our drive. It was snowing heavily as we left the rest stop. I could barely see the road to I-90 when I saw a man carrying a little boy hitchhiking. My first thought was he was an idiot parent endangering his child, and that poor kid shouldn't be in a blizzard. It never occurred to me to wonder where his car was located. I picked them up so the boy wouldn't freeze. The man never offered any information about where he came from or where he was going. The man also did not realize when I picked him up that I had 2 teen boys in the back of my van, and he became unnerved and began speaking in this maniacal fashion about buying a boat in Arizona. You know where you get a good boat? Arizona? Do you know why? There's no ocean, so they sell them cheap. I was relieved when he turned to the boys in the back of my Plymouth Voyager and began talking to them so I could tune him out and concentrate on driving. The man had curly brown hair with a devil's lock in the front and a scar on his upper lip and his chin. The boy appeared to be between 2-4 years of age, wearing a blue coat, red or blue warm-up pants with either an offset red or blue seam on the pants and light colored boots that resembled construction boots. The boy would not look at any of us, nor did he turn to the man for comfort, just looked down at the floor and didn't move from the man's lap. I felt bad for him, thinking he must be so scared of us. They were not with us very long, and the man asked to be let out at the gas station in Superior, Montana, and that was the end of that interaction. In 2017, I found true crime, and it made me reflect on the 17-year-old me and the terrible risks I took hitchhiking and picking up hitchhikers. I had a few disturbing rides, but the one that sticks out the most was the hitchhiker and the boy. On a whim, I Googled serial killers, I-90, and missing children. I remember the man looked like one of my hometown attorneys, very distinctive eyes. I didn't really believe I would find any likely offenders until I did. My heart dropped when I saw the devil's lock and scars on his lip and chin, and even more when I found a video he posted online, his maniacal voice, style and tone, matching the boat guy. Joseph Duncan Athuri. The worst part was that there was a little boy that went missing in the same region 2 days prior. I connected with his aunt, and she connected me with the FBI because I had provided a detail that they hadn't made public. If you've ever researched Duncan, you know that he was one of the worst human beings ever. He had a court date on the same day I would have picked him up, coincidentally his birthday, and there is no record of him showing up for that court date. There was a warrant issued for his arrest in 1997 for missing a court date, and by April he absconded and ended up in California, where he took the life of another young victim. I wrote him a letter, and he wrote back and stated that he was not the man I picked up, but that I was very brave for picking up a hitchhiker. The letter is the weirdest thing I've ever received in the mail. Here's a link to the letter, one more thing. While I was looking into the timeline of Duncan, I reached out to the 2 teenagers that were with me at that time. They both said that it could be him based on the photos and in the video, but they couldn't be 100% sure. They said the creepiest part was when the man turned around to talk to them. He had said, "You're not buying any of this bullsh, are you?" And then he asked to be let out at the next town. I met a killer. This is a story from over 30 years ago, but it's important to tell so people know to follow their gut. One piece of backstory is my parents had just installed a metal railing in front of our front door, so you had to walk to the driveway to then walk to the door. Me, K killer, MP mom. When I was 8, I liked in a middle-class suburb on a dead-end street. Because of this, we played outside without our parents all the time. One day, an older white car came down the street and turned around at the end and just say there. I was playing in the yard by myself. My volleyball rolled out into the street, and as I was walking into the street to get at the ball, the car started and drove up to where my ball was and leaned out and picked it up. "K, is this yours?" "Me, yes, K, come get it." "Me, throw it to me, K." "No, you can come get it, or I will take it." Something in me said, "Run." I turn around and start running directly to the door, forgetting the railing. I saw the railing at the last minute and jumped. That was the only hurdle I have ever done in my life. I found my mom in the kitchen. Me, Zane, mom, some creepy guy took my ball. Mom, what who me, don't know, he told me to come get it from him, or he would take it. Mom, did you hit him with the ball or something? Me, no, it was in the street, and he drove up in a car like dad used to have to grab it. Mom had weird look, but told me I did the right thing to come inside. A week later, we saw a news report that a guy in the exact same car had kidnapped, raped, and killed a 6-year-old in a neighboring community. I remember my parents getting really quiet and making a lot of phone calls, and I had to tell my story to the police. Killer who was never caught, let's not meet. I'm a serial killer. I met something scarier. It was 3:17 a.m. at the Waffle House. I wiped my mouth with my sleeve and pushed the table away from my fat belly, the metal chair scraping the greasy floor. I had time to kill until the next job, so I headed out to the parking lot to make my way to the nearest motel. I hadn't come through this town yet, so no one should recognize me there, I figured. Stumbling with my bum leg past the dumpsters, I about had a damn heart attack when the lid slammed. I shook my head and kept going. Another slam. Rage boiled over me. I stopped to glare back at the dumpsters, waiting to see which methed-out employee had been responsible. The wood doors around the dumpsters creaked in the night wind, closing themselves slowly. Another slam and the door popped open. Looking like he'd kicked it open with his foot, the employee strolled out carelessly, whistling a jolly little tune even. I rolled my shoulders and huffed. This fucker was about to learn some respect. I cracked my knuckles and headed back towards him. "Hey," I shouted. He stopped, startled. I closed the distance and grabbed a fistful of his greasy black apron. He was mid-40s maybe, but looked 80. He had the classic sunken eyes and leathery skin of hard living or drugs. He just stood there, mouth agape, like the stupid animal he was. I wanted to knock out his nasty black teeth. "Do you have any idea? Hey, you there?" Another voice interrupted me. The other man leaned against the building by the door, one hand in his pocket and the other smoking a cigarette. I must have been too angry to have noticed him before. "I've been looking for a truck driver," he said. My grip on the employee tightened in rage. He was shaking now. "Excuse me," I yelled back. "I could use a ride," the man said calmly, "if you'd be so kind." Getting a better look at him, I was more confused. He wasn't an employee. He didn't have the stupid black apron. He wore dusty boots, raggedy jeans, and a gray zip-up jacket. But his face was what interested me. Young, bright eyes, pale and smooth skin, blonde, like a halo around his head. My anger was replaced by something else, something darker. I threw the employee to the ground. "Get lost," I told him. He scrambled away. I didn't care to look. My focus was on someone else now. I made my way to the other man, wary but interested. "You ain't got fucking family to help you?" I asked. He was pretty. Too pretty. Like one of those weird celebrities with two perfect faces. I couldn't look away. Surely someone would miss him if something happened to him. "Nope," he answered, stomping out his cigarette. "There's no one to care." He picked up the cigarette butt and flicked it into the can beside him. Like he didn't want to litter, like that one cigarette would really make a difference. "Chept you, maybe," he said with a smile and a wink. "Maybe I can convince you to care." Something about him felt charming. Playful. A little ray of life in this hellhole. He didn't belong here. Of course, neither did the others I'd picked up. I just had one question. "How old are you?" I asked. Those blue eyes looked me up and down, studying me. Not in a nervous manner, but something else. It made me a little uncomfortable, but not enough for me to care. 19, he said after a pause. The darkness stirred again. This was too good to be true. I've got a little cash on me. He said, I'm sure we could work something out. I had already decided the minute I saw him. Fine, I told him, hurry up. He smiled a little too wide. You're too kind, he said. I scoffed, yeah, but I'm a real saint. So, where you headed? I asked as we settled into the cab. Anywhere's better than here, he said. I stifled a smile. It was funny when they said things they'd regret. You really got no one out here. Not family, not a girlfriend, nothing. He paused to think, then leaned a little closer, a wry, shit-eating grin on that perfect face. You really think I'd be in your truck if I did? I chuckled openly at that one. Yeah, okay, you got me there. Well, it's going to be a while till the next stop. I warned him. Perfect, he said, settling into his seat. Maybe I will have a friend by the end of this. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, whatever I said. His weird sense of humor was a nice change of pace. I thought this ride might actually be enjoyable. I usually didn't enjoy their company until they were hogtied in the back. Last gas 103 miles, the sign read. Another hour and we'd be at the spot I'd picked out. You ever get scared out here? His voice startled me. It sounded different, distorted almost. I chalked it up to the altitude, fucking with my ears. It was the first thing he had said in maybe 30, 40 minutes. I had actually thought he was sleeping. He had been awfully quiet ever since we'd gotten off the main roads. I ain't scared of nothing, kid, I told him. Smun, everybody gets scared. He pushed on, leaning closer to me like he had a secret. Sometimes it's even fun to be scared. Now that was funny. I'd have to tease him about that later. Why the hell would I be scared out here? Well, for starters, he said, there's no one else around. No one to see you, no one to hear you, no one to help you. I was chuckling now too, shaking my head. That was kind of the point of this, kid. Nothing but the pines and the fog off the creek, he continued. Well, the fog is annoying, I'll give you that. I said, I can't tell you how many times a fucking deer just pops out and smears itself all over the windshield. Even then, the fog was so thick I couldn't see but maybe a single car length in front of us. The truck lights only made it worse. I powered through up the hills like I always did. There were never any other vehicles on that road. Ah, the poor deer, he said. They used to have more natural predators out here, but they were all driven off a long, long time ago. Something was off about him. Different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the warm and sunny act he'd put on earlier was gone. He felt cold now, distant, a little creepy even. It didn't matter. We were almost there. We sat in silence for another little while. I kept my eyes to the fog swirling in the headlights. He kept his eyes locked on me, staring without a word like I'd vanish if he even fucking blinked. Hell, maybe he was getting scared now. He had every right to after all. The air in the cab got colder. It was supposed to be a warm night, I thought. Condensation built up on the window from the sudden change. I flipped the wipers on, sighing as they made that god-awful nails on a chalkboard screech with every swipe. The biggest spider I've ever seen in my life crawled out of the air vent. Holy shit! It was the size of my fucking fist, hairy and dark with yellow stripes on its legs. I'm a proud man, not afraid of much. But I don't fuck around with goddamn tarantulas. I nearly lost control of the truck trying to whack it back to whatever hell it came from. Silently, without even so much as a flinch, the other man placed his pale, smooth hand atop the dash, palm up like an offering. My mouth hung open as the spider went into his palm and just as quickly into his zip-up jacket. I almost couldn't speak. What the fuck was that, man? I stammered, I swear to God, if that's your fucking pet, it's not, he said calmly, unless it wants to be. I was gonna explode. Surely, I would stroke out any minute. And it looks to be a tiger wolf spider, but I'm not an entomologist. Take that thing out of your pocket now, I demanded. He took out the spider calmly, like it was a pack of smokes, like any of this was normal. Looking at it the second time was almost worse. I squinted my eyes and looked away to the road. Kill that fucking thing! You'd like that? Wouldn't you? The voice wasn't his, it was a woman's. Hers from last week. I glanced over. She was in the passenger seat again. Tiny, frail, like a bird. A little button, nose and blue eyes. Yellow blonde hair. The skin on half her face was gone to gory bone, including a hollow eye socket. The spider climbed into it. What the fuck? I slammed on the brakes. The truck skid to a stop as I caught my breath. I looked around frantically. The young man looked groggy, bewildered. He rubbed his eyes and ran his hands through his hair. How long was I out? He asked. What the fufke are you talking about? My heart thumped in my ears, my throat was dry and my body soaked in sweat. I was shaking. The man was calm, half asleep, looking at me like I had two heads. He reached in his pocket and pulled out a pack of smokes. No spider. "You want to take a break?" he asked me, concern in his soft voice. This didn't make sense. "Where's the goddamn spider?" I demanded. He jolted upright, looking in his seat and around the cab. "There's a spider in here." "Where?" I ran my clammy hands over my face, rubbing my eyes. I looked around the cab. Everything looked normal. The young man just blinked at me like an innocent little doe in headlights, hand still outstretched with the pack of smoke. I ripped the pack from his hands. "We're taking a break," I said. "Cool," he said, disinterested. He started to follow me out of the truck. "No, you wait inside," I snapped. "Alrighty," he chimed back. I stepped out into the humid, foggy air. The temperature shocked me. It had been so much colder in the cab. I must have turned the damn AC on and not known it. This wasn't the spot I usually took them to, but it was close enough, far away enough where no one could see or hear anything, just like that stupid kid said. It would do just fine, and I could just drive his body out farther to where I usually dumped them. But after that weird dream, I wasn't sure I wanted to go where the other ones were. Maybe I would just carve out a new spot here, I thought. I was around the back, mixing up 2 special cups of Joe when I heard the passenger door open and close. I went back around quickly. "God damn it," I said, staying that no one was there. The truck lights flickered and a cold chill shook my body. I peered through the fog, but there was nothing. Maybe I was going a little crazy. Maybe I was just tired. I took the mugs back to the inside of the cab and carefully handed the correct one to the man beside me. "Coffee?" I asked. "I'm not a coffee person," he said politely. "Everyone says that until they have my coffee," I winked. He laughed and shook his head. "You're terrible," he said, grinning wide with those perfect teeth. I watched him absolutely gulp his coffee down like a sick, dying camel. Confused, I took a small sip of mine. It nearly burned my lip clean off. Weird, but at least it wouldn't take as long to work, I figured. "So, what's your story?" I asked him, realizing I never played the get to know you game that I usually slog through with my passengers. "Oh, I'm just an old soul passing through," he said. "My story's a long one. I don't think we'd have the time to cover it if we tried." "See that? You're so young, but you talk like an old fucking man." I chuckled. "I mean, where do you get that?" "Where do you get that?" "Where are you from?" "Well, my ex-girlfriend thought I was from the depths of hell." He sat his mug down, completely finished with it, but I assured her I'm Catholic. I laughed at his joke, a little too loud. I sipped my coffee. "Women, eh? I thought she was an angel. I still do," he said, "but now I doubt she could even walk into church without bursting into flames." I slapped my knee, doubling over. I couldn't remember the last time I laughed so hard my cheeks were warm. "You're too young to be having fucking women problems," I told him. He murmured. "But just the right age to die." I blinked. "Huh. That's the perfect age, isn't it?" He said, 18 to 21. Blonde hair, blue eyes, no one to miss them. I stammered. My thoughts were clunky. I hadn't realized how dizzy I was getting. No, that wasn't possible. I made the coffee myself. I gave him the coffee myself. He downed it in seconds. The cab was freezing cold again. My head spun, my thoughts racing. The air was humid, my mouth so dry it felt glued together. I was spacing out, losing time. Suddenly, I was in the back of the truck on the cot where he was supposed to be. The fog rolled in with me. Against it, he stood at the edge of the open truck, a dark shape in the night. "You know, Father Romano says I shouldn't harm anything with a soul," he said. The distortion was back in his voice like an old corrupted mixtape. He was holding rope in his hand. "And to tell you the truth," he continued, "I've always had a soft spot for animals, so I've never liked hurting them." In a blink, he was next to me, tying off my arm like a tourniquet. "But you don't have a soul, do you?" He was in my face, inches away, so close he blurred. "And you're worse than an animal because you know better." Tears rolled down my face, the sheer thunder of his voice shaking me to my core. It was unnatural, ungodly. "Why did you do it?" His voice was soft, calm, as harmless as it had been before. "Why did you kill all those poor little girls and boys? And to leave their bodies like that, dumped so unceremoniously in my backyard?" He shook his head at me, frowning. "At least I kill for a reason." His limbs began snapping. Loud pops as they twisted, contorted, grew taller and longer. A black shadow overtook his body, erasing all trace of his humanity in a blink, like he had never had skin or clothes or even a face to begin with. There was nothing. Only a dark shape remained, made of long, twisted muscle and bone, shaped like some bastardized version of a man with horns. Then a smile appeared, that wide smile, so perfect and sharp. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I tried to stay awake, but I was fading fast. The figure launched towards me on all fours, moving like a spider on its freaky limbs. It was over top of me in seconds. God, I'm so hungry. His face was almost pressed against mine, bared teeth dripping saliva onto my nose and mouth. I felt nothing. He rose back up in a blink, standing upright, legs bending to fit in the trailer. He wiped his mouth carefully and ran a clawed hand through the silhouette of his once beautiful hair right between his horns. He sighed. But I have to be patient, he said softly. You need to last a while. I suppose I'll pick you apart piece by piece, rationing your disgusting body. His face was in front of mine again, grinning. And then when I'm done making you useful, I'm not going to kill you. Oh no, that's too easy for you. Everything was fading fast, patches of black closing in on me. He grabbed my face with a clawed hand, pulling me close to make sure I heard every word. I'm going to dump your limbless body with all the people you've killed way out here in the pines. You can use your fucking teeth to dig your way out of the mud, choking on it like you deserve. He dropped my face, my head slamming back down. Everything went dark. I prayed I wouldn't wake up again. Not to this. But my prayers never meant much, and I knew from my sins that the drugs were only temporary. That's gonna wrap up today's video. What makes these stories so unsettling isn't just the crime. It's how normal everything seemed before it happened. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and if you'd like more true Reddit stories like this. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.